Good afternoon to you all. In the last session, we were discussing about the types of vaccines, and we also discussed about different approaches in developing the vaccines. We saw about live attenuated vaccines, inactivated vaccines, and in today's class, we will discuss in detail about the DNA vaccines. To understand better about the live attenuated vaccines, the live attenuated vaccine contain living pathogenic microorganism that has been attenuated or weakened so that it has lost its significant pathogenicity. So what you're seeing is the flow chart for the live attenuated vaccines. So how is this accomplished? So this is accomplished by serial passage through a foreign host, say for example tissue culture, embryonated eggs or live animals for multiple generations. So this extended passages introduces one or more mutations into the new host. Now the mutated pathogen is significantly different from the original pathogenic form. So it cannot cause disease in the original host but can effectively induce the immune response. Right. So the live attenuated virus vaccines, they are prepared from attenuated strains that are almost or completely devoid of pathogenicity but are capable of inducing a protective immune response. They multiply in the human host and provide continuous antigenic stimulation over a period of time. Right. So, how the live attenuated vaccines are prepared? They are prepared from attenuated strains that are almost or completely devoid of pathogenicity but are capable of inducing a protective immune response. So the live attenuated vaccines, they stimulate protective immune responses when they replicate in the host. Right. So the viral proteins, they maintain the potency, and that is the reason why live attenuated vaccines require lesser temperatures or they require refrigeration conditions and protection from sunlight in case of storage. And if you just look at the examples of live attenuated vaccines, we have vaccines for the measles, mumps, rubella, that is MMR vaccines, cowpox, yellow fever, influenza, and oral polio vaccine. And in case of bacteria, that is live attenuated bacterial vaccines, they include the tuberculosis, BCG, and the oral typhoid vaccine. Right. And what are the advantages of live attenuated vaccines? So it is now learned that the live attenuated vaccine is close to the natural infections, and these vaccines, they know how to mount an immune system. So the attenuated vaccines, they elicit a strong immunoprotective cellular and antibody responses, and they also confer immunity for long time, and in many cases lifelong immunity with only one or two doses. So these are the typical advantages of live attenuated vaccines. Now, what are the disadvantages faced by these live attenuated vaccines? Despite the advantages of live attenuated vaccines, there are some disadvantages associated with it. So it is the nature of living things to change or mutate, and the organisms used in live attenuated vaccines are no different. That means they also have the capability to change or mutate. So the major disadvantage of attenuated vaccines is that secondary mutations can lead to reversion to virulence, and thus there are possibility that it causes the disease. And there is another possibility of interference by related viruses. Right. So not everyone can safely receive the live attenuated vaccines. People with immune compromised, damaged or weakened immune systems, say for example in case of chemotherapy, HIV infection, and sometimes in pregnancy, they cannot be given live vaccines. And another limitation is that live attenuated vaccines usually need the cold chain to stay potent, and the skilled workers, healthcare workers, are required to handle these vaccines at a specific temperature. And this adds to the cost. So the mass immunization programs in developing countries suffer a severe lag against the use of these live attenuated vaccines. If you just recollect how the polio vaccine is stored and given, so they maintain the vaccines in the ice box. So somehow the polio vaccine immunization program is very successful in a country like India, but by and large, when the live attenuated vaccines are used, they suffer, or the mass immunization programs are hampered in countries where they lack the refrigeration conditions and have a limited access to the skilled healthcare workers. This is not really true in case of the country like India. We have a very good system for that. In these cases where the countries do not have a widespread refrigeration system and which are limited or which have limited access to the skilled healthcare workers. Here, a live attenuated vaccine may not be the best choice. So, the possibility of contaminating virus in cultured cells, it aggravates the vulnerability of live attenuated vaccines. Right. So, with understanding the concept of live attenuated vaccines, their advantages and many disadvantages associated with it, we will try to understand what is inactivated whole virus vaccines are. Considering the disadvantages of the live attenuated vaccines, the another approach that was used to develop vaccines is the inactivated whole virus vaccine. So, in this approach, the causative whole pathogen is killed or inactivated. How it is done? Heat or maybe chemicals, say for example the formaldehyde or the beta propionolactane, or maybe the radiations. So these are typically used to inactivate the antigens. So this is the flow chart for production of inactivated whole virus vaccine. Now the chemical treatment destroys a pathogen's ability to replicate. Again, it keeps the immunogenic structure intact in its natural form. And it becomes very crucial to ensure the integrity of the structure of antigenic epitopes of surface antigens. Thereby, inactivated whole pathogen vaccines, they provide protection by directly generating the T helper cells and tumor immune response against the pathogenic immunogen. And in the case of absence of cellular production of the antigens, so these vaccines are usually devoid of the ability to induce significant T cytotoxic responses. Right. So in addition, these vaccines, they are not that means they are not actually produced in the host by replication of the pathogen, and therefore to be effective, non-replicating virus vaccines must contain much more antigen than live attenuated vaccines, because in case of live attenuated vaccines, they are capable or they are able to replicate in the host. Since they are not actually produced in the host, that means the inactivated antigens or the pathogens, in order to be effective, the non-replicating virus vaccines must contain much more antigen than do the live attenuated vaccines. So the immunity induced by inactivated killed vaccines, they frequently decreases during the life of the host. That's the reason why you require additional boosters to achieve lifelong immunity. Right? That's the reason why you require booster doses. Because the immunity induced by inactivated kill vaccines, they frequently decrease during the life of the host because they are not capable to replicate in the host. So in that case, you require additional boosters to achieve lifelong immunity. The killed vaccines, they offer some important advantages over live vaccines. What are those advantages? They are produced outside the host, and since they are produced outside the host, they can be designed to contain only the specific antigenic target of the pathogen that is involved in the development of protective immunity. Right? So, since they are produced outside the host, they can be designed to contain only the specific antigenic target of the pathogen that is involved in the development of protective immunity. And some of the examples of currently available inactivated vaccines are the rabies vaccine, we have the polio vaccines and hepatitis A vaccine. And in case of whole inactivated bacterial vaccines include the vaccines for pertussis, typhoid, cholera and plague. Right? So what are the specific advantages? These vaccines are more stable and they are of course safer than the live attenuated vaccines. So since they are dead, so they cannot mutate back to their disease causing state. And inactivated vaccines, because it is a dead microbe, they usually don't require refrigeration and they can be easily stored and transported in a freeze dried form, that is in the powder form, which makes them cheap and easily accessible to people in most of the developing countries. And it also suffers from disadvantages. The most inactivated vaccines stimulate a weaker immune response when compared to the live attenuated vaccines. So, what is the solution? You require multiple booster doses so as to maintain a protective immunity level. So, this can be a drawback in areas where people don't have regular access to healthcare system, and if they fail to get the booster dose or shots on time, then it is of no use. So excessive treatment can destroy the immunogenicity, and whereas insufficient treatment can leave infectious virus capable of causing the disease. Right? And there is an additional increased risk of allergic reactions due to the presence of large amounts of unrelated structural antigens of the microorganisms. So this is possible in case of the inactivated whole virus vaccines. Now we have the DNA vaccines. This DNA vaccination is relatively recent development in the vaccine technology, and in short, this involves the direct introduction of a plasmid into the appropriate tissue containing the complete expression cassette, independently encoding the antigens against which the immune response is required or sought. So the DNA immunization is a novel technique in its own way, which is used to efficiently stimulate the humoral and cellular immune responses to the antigens, more specifically the protein antigens. We have lot of literature citing the studies such as direct gene transfer of plasmid DNA into mouse muscle and plasmid DNA encoding reporter genes induced protein expressions within the muscle cells. And all these studies have provided evidence that naked DNA could be delivered in vivo to direct protein expression. It's possible. So the DNA vaccines usually consist of plasmid vectors. So these vectors, they are derived from the bacteria that contains the heterologous genes, or we call it as transgenes, which are inserted under the control of an eukaryotic promoter, thus allowing the expression of the proteins in mammalian cells. Right. And if we'll just look back at the history, the use of genetic material to deliver genes for the therapeutic purpose, it has been practiced for many years. It's not new. And in 1950s, we have seen that there were experiments which outlined the transfer of DNA into cells of living animals. And later, the experiments using purified genetic material confirmed that the direct gene or the DNA gene injection in the absence of viral vectors, that results in the expression of the inoculated genes in the host. So all these studies have prompted the use of DNA immunization so as to efficiently stimulate the humoral and cellular immune response to any protein antigens. If you look at the construction of DNA vaccines, so as I said earlier, DNA vaccines, they are composed of bacterial plasmids, and expression plasmids used in DNA based vaccination, it normally contain two units. Number one, the antigen expression unit composed of promoter or the enhancer sequences, followed by antigen encoding and polyadenylation sequences. And number two, the production unit composed of bacterial sequences which are necessary for plasmid amplification and selection. Right? So the construction of bacterial plasmids with vaccine inserts, it can be accomplished using the recombinant DNA technology. So the expression plasmids used in DNA based vaccinations contain two units. Number one, the antigen expression unit composed of promoter or enhancer sequences, followed by antigen coding and polyadenylation sequences. And number two, the production unit composed of bacterial sequences necessary for plasmid amplification and selection. So a DNA vaccine against a microbe would evoke a strong antibody response to the free floating antigen secreted by the cells. And such vaccine would also stimulate a strong immune response against the microbial antigens which are displayed on cell surfaces. Thus, what we can conclude by drawing a line is the DNA vaccine couldn't cause the disease, but it wouldn't contain the microbe. It is just copies of few of its genes. And DNA vaccines are relatively easy and inexpensive to design and even produce. So we know how economical it is to design a sequence. It doesn't cost much. So the so-called naked DNA vaccines, it consists of DNA that is administered directly into the body, and these vaccines can be administered with a needle and syringe, or even with a needleless device that uses high pressure gas to shoot the microscopic gold particles, even that is possible, coated with DNA directly into the cells. And sometimes there is another option that DNA is mixed with molecules that facilitate its uptake by the body cells. So classical examples for the DNA vaccines are that these naked DNA vaccines, they are being tested in humans against the influenza and herpes virus. Right? Now, just we'll try to understand what is the mechanism. We have a plasmid vector that expresses the protein of interest, say for example the viral protein. It is under the control of an appropriate promoter, which is injected under the skin or muscle of the host. Right? And after uptake of the plasmid, the protein is produced endogenously and it is processed intracellularly into small antigenic peptides by the host proteases. So these peptides then enter the lumen of the endoplasmic reticulum by membrane associated transporters, and in the endoplasmic reticulum the peptides bind to MHC class 1 molecules, and these peptides, they are presented on the cell surface in the context of the MHC class 1, and subsequently the CD8 plus cytotoxic T cells, they are stimulated and they invoke cell mediated immunity. So these cytotoxic T cells, they inhibit viruses through both cytolysis of infected cells and non-cytolysis mechanism such as cytokine production. Right. So the foreign protein can also be presented by the MHC class 2 pathways by the antigen presenting cells, which elicits the helper T cells. So these responses, that is CD4 plus responses, so these CD4 plus cells, they are able to recognize the peptides formed from exogenous proteins that were supposed to be endocytosed or phagocytosed by APCs and degrade to peptide fragments and loaded onto MHC class 2 molecules. Right. So depending upon the type of the CD4 plus cells that binds to the complex, B cells are stimulated and antibody production is stimulated. So this is the basic mechanism of how a DNA vaccine really works. Looking at the advantages, the DNA vaccines or the immunization offer many advantages over the conventional forms of vaccinations. Number one, it is able to induce the expression of antigens that resemble native viral epitopes more closely than the standard vaccines do. Because live attenuated and killed vaccines are often altered in their protein structures and antigenicity, but it is not true with respect to DNA vaccines. And plasmid vectors can be constructed and produced quickly, and the coding sequence can be manipulated. So these are the advantages of DNA vaccines. And rapid large scale production is available at lower cost, and these are temperature stable, making the storage and transport much easier. And another important advantage of the DNA vaccines is their therapeutic potential for the ongoing chronic viral infections, right? But it also has disadvantages. The Although the DNA can be used to raise the immune response against the pathogenic proteins, certain microorganisms have outer capsids made up of polysaccharides. So this limits the extent of the usage of DNA vaccines because they cannot be substitute, or they cannot be the substitute for polysaccharide based subunit vaccines. So we have a different class of vaccines for that, that is polysaccharide based subunit vaccines. It cannot be a substitute for that polysaccharide based subunit vaccines, right? So these are the disadvantages associated with the DNA vaccines. So to conclude about the future of DNA vaccines, so recently it has been discovered that the infection or the transfection of the myocytes can be amplified by pre-treatment with the cardiotoxins, which induce local tissue damage and initiate myoblast regeneration. So gaining a full understanding of this mechanism of DNA uptake definitely will prove helpful in improving the applications of gene therapy as well and gene vaccinations. In both way it is possible, right? So improved expression and better engineering of the DNA plasmid may enhance the antibody response to the gene products and expand the applications of the DNA vaccines. So with these concepts, I hope you are clear with the strategy of developing the DNA vaccines. So I'll stop my discussion over here. We can continue our discussion in the next session with another different concept. Thank you very much.